Now we're going to talk about gender and identity. So gender roles influence the possible selves contemplated by both males and females. So a historical perspective. It used to be that women were not given a choice in their identity development. The same was true for some men. They were expected to do whatever their father did. But it was much worse for women. They didn't really have a choice in anything that they did. And that is getting better, finally. So Erickson's belief on this. He did believe that there were differences in the identity development of males and females, but those beliefs reflected the ideals of his time, which was the 1960s and 70s. So he compared the importance of interpersonal relationships, careers, and philosophies in life in males and females. He concluded that relationships were more important in women's identity development, whereas occupational and ideological matters were more important to men. He said that a young woman's identity was tied into her roles as a wife and a mother. His stages of identity development, therefore, reflected more of what he believed men went through than women. So it was a gender-biased theory. Modern research shows that females approach identity formation in much the same way as men do. Teen males and females are just as likely to consider occupational choices, but females are more likely to integrate occupational and family plans. Both begin identity formation in adolescence, but some females delay having a strong sense of identity by staying home or deferring employment until their children are grown. So here's a discussion that I'll post on Blackboard. Does that mean that all women who choose to be a homemaker or a stay-at-home mom are in a state of diffusion or moratorium? Are some in foreclosure? Feel like being a homemaker is their lot in life? Are some in achievement? All right, I'll post that discussion on Blackboard. I look forward to seeing what you think. Identity versus intimacy. Intimacy is Erickson's next stage of identity formation, usually in young adulthood. Men appear to develop their identity before they go for intimacy, but some women do the same. Some develop identity and intimacy at the same time. So here's another discussion. Are there double standards? Is there still a double standard in how our culture views the identity of women and men? What about in other cultures? Okay, is there a difference in how we view women and men in this culture versus other cultures? So I'll post both of these discussions on Blackboard. So self-concept in adolescence. Brief review. How did preschoolers describe themselves? Well, they used very physical traits, their likes, their actions, okay, things you could see. Elementary school students added some psychological characteristics. They started talking about their relationships. So now, how do adolescents describe themselves? They have distinct and enduring personality traits. They describe more categories and that vary with the social roles. For example, they might say that they are anxious or sarcastic with their parents, but caring, talkative, and cheerful with their friends. So they realize that they have different traits in different situations with different people. As formal operational thought becomes more advanced, adolescents can integrate apparently contradictory aspects of themselves. For example, they might say, I'm very adaptable. When I'm around my friends who think what I say is important, I'm very talkative. But around my family, I'm quiet because they're not interested enough to really listen to me. So their self-concept gets much more sophisticated. So mood swings. Remember, early theorists referred to adolescence as a time of storm and stress. But is this real? Is it really a period of storm and stress? Well, modern research shows that adolescent moodiness is based more on changes in activities and settings rather than being inherent. So, for example, they'll have one mood while hanging out with their friends, then they'll switch moods when they go to a class, then they'll go to practice, then home with their parents, etc. So every activity kind of brings a change of mood with it. Because adolescents in today's world are frequently changing activities and settings, their mood appears to switch suddenly and often. So it seems to be that mood swings are due more to changing activities rather than hormones. Another big factor is sleep. Do adolescents get enough sleep? Physically, adolescents are wired to go to sleep later and wake up later. Their circadian rhythm is shifted by about an hour from everybody else. But most schedules, high schools, junior highs, practices, they don't allow for that. Okay? Add that to the fact that most adolescents are overscheduled, then they have to come home and do homework, and you get chronic sleep deprivation. So that their bodies are wired to stay up later, but they still have to get up early to go to school. And then you add all their activities and their homework and everything into it, and you have adolescents who are just not getting enough sleep. And the symptoms of sleep deprivation match the stereotypical idea of adolescent moodiness. Is this a coincidence? Or is adolescent moodiness partially due to sleep deprivation? Relationships with peers. So their time spent with their family decreases and is replaced. So 15-year-old boys spent about half as much time with their family as 9-year-olds do. For boys, the time was replaced with time alone. They just spend more time alone. For girls, it's replaced with time alone and with friends. So rather than spending time with their family, they're spending time by themselves or with their friends. There are differences between fathers and mothers. Adolescents continue to interact more with their mothers than their fathers. They have more conflicts with their mothers due to more interactions, but they also see their mothers as more supportive, knowing them better, and more likely to listen to their opinions. So it's like the good and the bad with the mothers. But a good relationship with their father does contribute to an adolescent's well-being. So having a good relationship with both parents is important. And most adolescents say that they do still feel close to their parents. So even though they are more independent and spend more time away, they still feel a great deal of love, loyalty, and respect for their parents. Adolescents who feel close to parents are more likely to have high self-esteem, self-reliance, and independence, school performance, and lower psychological and social problems. Again, it all comes back to attachment. Conflict. So, is conflict in adolescence good or bad? Early adolescence brings increased amount of bickering and disagreements and decreased amount of shared activities and expressions of affection. The conflict seems to be greatest during puberty and declines in later adolescence. Conflict typically center around everyday details of the family life, just chores, homeworks, curfew, etc. So, control. These conflicts arise as teen feels choices that were previously the purview of the parent should now belong to them. But parents, especially mothers, feel like they should still have control, such as in homework and in cleaning rooms. So it's sort of a battle over who gets to control decisions. As adolescents get older, compromise with parents is more likely. And in fact, adolescents often view conflict with their parents as positive, especially if it results in compromise of rules. Essentially, they want to feel heard. So a lot of times a parent will view conflict as a negative thing, but an adolescent might view it as a positive thing. So now values. Do adolescents and parents fight about values? There is actually very little evidence to support the idea of the generation gap. So is the generation gap real? Research suggests that it's not. Conflicts in values and beliefs are relatively few, as most adolescents hold similar ones to their parents in issues such as politics, religious, social issues, etc. Teens do tend to develop a less idealized view of their parents than they had as children, but most do not outright reject their parents' values. So by 10th grade, peers are seen as being more supportive than parents, and social lives are centered around people of their same age. So peers are really important to teenagers. So friendships. These are different from childhood friendships. Adolescents are more likely to stress the importance of acceptance, intimate self-disclosure, and mutual understanding. They also stress loyalty and trustworthiness more than children do. Friends do tend to be the same age, the same race, and almost always the same sex or gender. Usually alike in school attitudes, educational aspirations, and school achievement. They have similar attitudes about drinking, drug use, and sexual activity. So friends and adolescents demographically look the same still. So what are some of the benefits of friendships? Friendship contributes to positive self-concept and psychological adjustment. Teens with close friends have higher self-esteem and are more likely to show advanced stages of identity development. So having good friends helps with their exploration of identity. So peer groups, just some terms here. A clique is a small group who hang around together and share activities and confidences. A crowd is a larger, loosely organized group of people who are identified by shared activities but may or may not spend time together. So they might be classified as the jocks or the nerds, etc. So differences from childhood overall, more time spent with peers. That time has less adult guidance or control. And we start to see more peers of the opposite sex. Okay? And the peer group can influence identity. The peer group, the clique or the crowd that the teenager is with can influence their identity. So peer influence. Peers strongly influence interests, fashions, and behaviors. Peer pressure peaks during mid-adolescence and declines after about age 17. So why are teens so influenced by their peers? Well, peers provide a standard by which teens measure their behavior. Peers provide social, emotional, and practical support in times of trouble. So teens are more likely to conform to their peer standards in areas of style and taste, such as clothes, hairstyle, and music. But they are more likely to agree with their parents on the more serious issues, such as moral principles, education, and career goals. So this peer influence does have positive and negative effects. Peers can reinforce behaviors more than cause them. So peers are more likely to encourage a behavior that's already there rather than create a new behavior. But this means that they can reinforce good behaviors or bad ones. So they can be a force for good or bad. Girls are slightly more concerned with peer acceptance than boys, but boys are more likely to conform to pressure and to engage in misconduct. Parenting style matters too. Authoritative parenting tends to discourage negative peer influence. So if a teenager has parents who are authoritative, they are more likely to resist peer pressure that would lead them to negative behaviors. But authoritarian and permissive parenting styles encourage it. So teenagers with authoritarian or permissive parents are more likely to be influenced by their peers and more likely to succumb to peer pressure. And I'm also going to put a discussion on Blackboard as to why you think that is. So we're going to end with this comic about the teenager's brain. If you want to see it in more detail, look at it on the slides on Blackboard or just pause your screen. Okay, so that's all I have for social development in adolescence. If you have any questions, please post them on Blackboard.